To explain how the 4x4 gave us this freedom, we must inevitably go back to a time when we almost lost it forever. As the lights went out all over Europe, the Allies faced a deadly race to outthink and out-invent the enemy. The Brits had their radar and their bouncing bombs. The Russians, the mighty T-34. And the Americans, well, they came up with this.
This, as I'm sure you know, is a World War II Willy's Jeep.
Yeah, look 'em all!
Now, General Eisenhower said the three most significant instruments in securing Allied victory were the Douglas Dakota, the landing craft, and the Jeep. I've just realised it may be the most significant car ever made. Yeehaw! Now, there had been four-wheel drive army vehicles before this one. There were four-wheel drive trucks in World War I, and believe it or not, before that, people experimented with four-wheel drive traction engines. But this was a new vehicle for a new role. It was a fast, light reconnaissance car.
America knew that victory would depend on a massive land invasion of Europe, if they could find it.
So something like this was going to be necessary for beach landings, special ops, and for transporting John Wayne across really rough terrain.
Army chiefs called for a vehicle that could carry a quarter-ton payload with a wheelbase of not more than 80 inches. But most importantly, it should be four-wheel drive to ensure that the gum and nylons got through. Compared with the other stuff the US was secretly building, designing a little car from scratch might seem like a doddle. There was, however, a catch.
The American military asked America's car makers for proposals, giving them just 11 days to submit their bids, and then just 7 weeks to build a prototype, and just 2.5 months to come up with 70 working vehicles for testing. To put that into context, it took VW 3 years to develop the latest Golf.
Over 130 US manufacturers were invited to pitch for the job. But car makers American Bantam were the only ones to deliver.
Here it is, the so-called Blitz buggy, and it does look a bit like a Jeep. The problem was, American Bantam couldn't produce them in the numbers required. So the American government gave their drawings to Willys and Ford, who fiddled with them a bit. And eventually it was Willys who won the contract, largely because they had their excellent Go Devil engine and 3-speed gearbox.
But what really made the Willys Jeep stand out was its astounding all-terrain performance. A special gearbox allowed you to transfer into extra low gear to tackle the toughest conditions.
Even in 2015, you can sort of see why the Willys version was so popular with the military authorities. It has excellent low-down torque characteristics. Sort of thing people talk about in their 3 Series diesel BMWs. Anyway, over 600,000 Jeeps were produced during the war by Willys and under licence by Ford. And while we're at it, we may as well get to the bottom of the Jeep name. Now, a lot of people imagine that it's a reduction of GP for general purpose, but I'm afraid actually this isn't true. GP only appears on the Ford versions, and it's part of an internal coding system where G means government contract, and P is a code letter meaning a wheelbase of 80 inches.
A more likely origin is Eugene the Jeep, a strange animal from the Popeye cartoons. Popeye's Jeep was small, with wide-spaced eyes, and he would always do his master's bidding. A bit like Michael Gove.
So sorry about that, but if it's any consolation, Princess Anne really did own a Reliance scimitar.
Anyway, when the Allied invasion of Europe began, the Jeep would instantly prove its worth.
Patton plunged towards Germany, 400 miles away, with extraordinarily successful results.
From the Normandy beachheads across France and into the Low Countries, forward patrols in jeeps would often lead the way in liberating the people from the evils of fascism. Soon it was the turn of the Italian city of Bologna, named after the famous sauce.
What's rather disappointing about this exercise is that there aren't thousands and thousands of young women throwing flowers at me, which is, I'm pretty sure, what would have happened the first time round.
Shame, because I'm convinced this vintage Willy's capable of liberating the city all over again.
Unusually for a restored old car, and very unusually by the standards of this programme, this thing works absolutely perfectly. Bologna was liberated on the 21st of April 1945, and we don't know this for certain, but it seems likely that the very first Allied vehicle that the locals saw entering the Piazza Maggiore, where I'm standing now, was a Willy's Jeep. It had proved the worth of a light, compact, all-terrain car. It really had played a major role in saving the world. But now, it would start another war.
Willy's Jeeps were now scattered around the globe like army surplus combat trousers in a student house, and they would become an inspiration.
One of those leftover Jeeps made it to the Welsh holiday home of a man named Maurice Wilks, who happened to be the chief designer of the Rover Car Company. Now, post-war, Rover were in a bit of a tight spot, and Wilks was looking to build a simple, rugged 4x4 vehicle using readily available materials to keep the company ticking over while the economy recovered and people started buying proper cars again.
Wilks's first effort was based around his old Jeep chassis and had a strange central steering wheel. But pretty soon, it had turned into this.
The Series 1 Land Rover.